How often do you play nowadays?
Probably every day.
Every day still?
Every
Yeah.
day still,
Yeah.
it's just, but it's, I can hardly call it play because it's more like, having fun. So
Yeah.
this is this. So the word play actually for me is just, it's always has it's a professional connotation.
Yeah.
Play means, you play.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this, not exactly play.
Yeah. When you look at the geopolitics of AI, if we over the next couple of years get intelligence on par with Nobel Prize winners, and we get to AGI and then super intelligence and beyond, that should be a very useful technology for a nation state that wants to remain in control. What do you think, for example, Putin could actually do if he decided that AGI was his top priority?
I'm very skeptical of AGI and superintelligence and singularity. So I might be old-fashioned and wrong and retarded and behind the curve, but this is big talk. So this is so far everything I see is a jump and then plateau. So it's not the development of computer science is not one line. So this is always it's you have a jump and then quite a long plateau. So we're not even close to AGI. So that's as is being described. Maybe just we have different concepts of that. But AGI or not, superintelligence or not, computing power of that magnitude in the hands of bad guys, that's a challenge. So I keep repeating that humans have always monopoly for evil. So that's why our main concern should be now what happens if this technology, actually not if, it's already being used by these bad actors, by Putin, by Chinese, by Iranians, so this to undermine the free world. Because free world is, democracies are very vulnerable. They're open for this, for these attacks. And it's getting more and more, complicated to defend because one of the reasons is that we don't want to recognize we're at war. And also, I think this is a lot of, just wishful thinking. Oh, let's live in a world where we can share the information and know the technology. It can go come on, it's not about sharing technology. It's not about, it's living in harmony. We still live in a very dangerous world. And you look at the geopolitical map and you understand we are going through a period of great turbulence. It's a geopolitical redistribution of the map. It's a technological breakthrough, and quite an irony that the main weapon that is being used against the free world is something that has been invented, conceived, and designed and developed in the free world. So we just have to recognize this harsh reality and also recognize that our attempt to regulate things gives the other side, an advantage. DeepSeek is it was clearly, just a result of stealing some technologies, but also access to unlimited data. It's okay if I can make this an analogy. That's the engine is the bot is kind of the engine of the car, but the data is a fuel. And the Chinese engine could be worse, not as good as European or American one. But if you have enormous amount of fuel, free fuel, that you can put it in your tank, so then you have an advantage. And all these regulations like GDPR that have been designed and and then became kind of it's a great pride of European bureaucracy. I think they stole the development. It's totally useless to design the rules that are not respected by the competitors, because it's not nuclear proliferation. You don't need to build, this is the giant factories, this enriching uranium. So it's about transferring data. And I think that we get at a critical juncture where not recognizing that it's a serious competition that has political consequences and with most unpredictable outcome, negative outcome for the free world, unless we just, will benefit from our main advantage, which is It's the free world always had an upper hand because we have luxury of making mistakes. We are not dominated by the central planning, by the bosses that are just are trying to move things in one direction or another. So it's a free market. It's a free market of ideas, free market of creativity, but trying to organize it and trying to limit it and trying to put a cap on it, I think it's something that slows us down and makes us more vulnerable to the threats that are coming from the other side of this digital Iron Curtain.
When we yesterday asked ChatGPT, it was very clear who the greatest chess player of all time is. I'm not sure if you've done any LLM hacking there, but I think as far as I'm concerned, it's the truth.
Okay, it's still very subjective, but if you look at the numbers, and that is the way typically the ChatGPT makes declares its verdict. I mean, my numbers are pretty convincing. So yes, there's a competition with Magnus and probably with Fischer, but I think it's a very good chance that without any interference, you will keep receiving the same answer to this question.
And when you look at those records, like sometimes it feels a bit absurd. Like someone would probably midway they would have been like, okay, I've won enough, but it never felt like you won enough. Like what kept you going when and kept you so consistent over time?
Look, it always depends on your goals and your motivation. And yeah, you're right. It's at one point you say, okay, I'm the world champion. I won, and maybe I have to do something else. I can relax. But one of my elements of my motivation was it came from my mother. So it's a desire. It's a very strong desire to make a difference. So it's always about just opening some new horizons, coming up with new ideas. So that's why for me it's winning today was not just a guarantee of winning tomorrow. So that's why you won the game. You have to go back and just look at everything you did and be very very open-minded, very relentless by analyzing it. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges for many people is this: you could succeed. And then you just say, okay, instinctively, we're humans, let's celebrate, you open champagne, you just, you can take a rest, you can rest on your laurels. But it's a tough competition. So you slow down, somebody else is catching up. So for me, just, winning was just a part of the game, but staying on top and making difference and always being ahead of the curve. That was a real motivation. And I decided to leave chess when I just realized that, okay, this drive, it just was over. So that's okay. 20 years on top. I have to go elsewhere, just to apply my energy, my experience, my skills, to make a difference. Of course, not the same as I could do in chess, but still, making difference. And the next 20 years, I left professional chess 20 years ago. I think they were quite successful because I built a reputation in other walks of life, and it's on human rights, on somehow, just you may say, in computers world. But I represent not just a shadow of a former chess champion, even the greatest one, but also a person who has his own standing outside of the main professional field.
And how do you think it wired your mind? Do you think that growing up, spending basically your entire awakened time processing games and so on, has that sort of kept wiring you in a certain way that still is sort of hard-coded in how you think? Or when you sort of dropped playing the game, did you go back to?
I think it's if you look at me versus other top players, I think I was least involved in the game because, I worked a lot, but I had many other interests. I was well read, I was interested in politics and just, collecting data, processing data. So I had many interests.
I didn't know you were interested in politics.
Way. I'm talking about early, it's early days. And many of the interests were really, way far or quite far from chess. For me, everything was natural because consuming information, processing it, and coming up with some new ideas. That was a very natural process. When I just shifted back to chess, so this is after just having other things. So it was full concentration. So probably my greatest strength was concentration. I could concentrate. The level of concentration was way above the opposition, and I was in excellent physical shape, so which also helped playing younger opposition because by the end of the 90s I was in my 30s, mid 30s, and most of the opposition was 10 years younger, so it's just in their 20s. And I was still, in really good shape, both psychologically and physically, to go through this tournament. Because long tournament, when we play these traditional tournaments, a couple of weeks, they were quite exhausting. And when I played this event, so the day was filled with chess. So it's the typically 5-6 hours game, and normally it's just starting about 2 or 3 p.m. Then I spend my morning preparing for the game, then analyze the game when it's finished. So I slept very often just, with my mind still traveling, through the game. So it's probably 12 to 14 hours a day, chess. So, and I could manage it, and I enjoyed it. So, and at one point I just, realized, okay, it's too much. Yes, and it's also, it's a long time. 10, 15, 20 years. So you reach a point where you have to go elsewhere because it doesn't give you the same creative satisfaction. So, and I think I just, I made the right choice. So just leaving it's chess was just turning 42 20 years ago. It's March 2005. And it was just the start of new life. Also it was my, this is the marriage. It was my third marriage, but another very successful one. So, and it's just a transition. So my chess life that was related exclusively to my mother, who just devoted her life since my father, her husband, died when I was very young. I was 7, and she never remarried. Always, just stayed with her only son, and was just basically the manager, the engineer of all the successes. To the new life with my wife, who just became an engineer of my new life now. So and it's a different life. Different is because chess is very important. I mean, still I have to admit that people say, "Oh, Garry Kasparov, chess," but I'm very proud that they pay attention and they pay respect to other things that I'm doing, and I invested my chess popularity, my chess notoriety in my new life, becoming a person who has opinions that are just being widely received, respected, sometimes confronted in other fields.
And when you sort of study the greats over time, what do you think has shifted from your early days to Carlsen to the sort of post AlphaZero players? Do you think the game style has shifted a lot in relation to sort of the advancements in computing?
Of course, yeah. This is a dramatic change. Machines have profound impact on virtually everything we're doing, and chess is not an exception. So, I mean, first of all, we know that computers today are just way better than any chess player. So those were the days when I was a kid, when you could laugh looking at the computers, and you could just trick machines, so by just making some odd moves. Now, just to understand how dramatic the situation is, in a blitz game, in a 3 minutes chess, so machine can beat top players. I'm talking about top players in the world by giving a one-piece handicap. So that's like a knight handicap. So I saw just a few days ago, Vasily Graf and Caruana playing this. Okay, it's on the phone. We're not talking about it's a mega computer. It's a chess engine, on the phone, and it's almost humiliating. So but it's not, it doesn't make us, just frightened. It's a fact. Machines make fewer mistakes. So, and humans are even the best humans. In at our best days, we still make some mistakes, inaccuracies. We are far from being perfect. So this is always, just this human. It's human weakness. So you could play a great game, but you may lose your vigilance at one point. So, and it's with machine, the level of intensity is too high for humans to even for the best humans in their specific field to sustain. And the knowledge that brought by the machines, it's even before AlphaZero, just the general knowledge brought by the machines enriched the game of chess. I mean, today you have a kid at 12, 13 years old, playing grandmaster level, who knows much more than Fischer knew 50 years ago. Actually, more than 50 years ago. So this is, or even just knowing more than Karpov or myself knew. It's partly because we made also great contribution and machines helped to build on it, but clearly, it creates a different playing environment. So this chess is getting younger because you don't have to play for 10, 15, 20 years to gain this experience. So you can learn very quickly, but also because of the machine's intervention in the openings, the game it's different. So there's very little risk being taken in the opening. So spending all the time analyzing these very sharp openings as we did doesn't make any sense. It's a very poor investment of your time because everything depends on your ability to work with a computer. And even the best player could be crashed if he enters a very sharp line and somehow his opponent, not probably as strong as a chess player, but savvy with a computer, could work it out at home. So you may just not survive the openings if your preparation was not effective. So that's why you saw the shift of chess from very sharp, aggressive openings to more positional, where you can postpone the conflict until in the middle game, and it's more about your stamina. It's about your understanding of the game, rather than about you figuring out everything at the early stage.
There's this one game against Karpov where I think you're up a pawn, but it's not entirely clear whether you're going to defeat him. But then he comes in, and you see in his face that he doesn't like his position, and you go on to win that game. What do you think has been that impact of like the psychological aspects of playing against others?
So, psychology is a very important element, sometimes crucial element of any game where you have facial contact. So obviously, it's more important in poker than in chess, because in chess you have all information available. So in poker you can bluff. But if you spend a lot of time, and with Karpov we played dozens of games of the World Championship matches. So it's it's dozens. It's 144 games in total. So and then many games, in the ordinary tournaments. So hundreds of hours just facing each other. So that's why many, emotional responses. Even the slightest change in emotion can be easily noticed, because you even if you are not a big expert, sitting in front of one opponent for hundreds of hours, eventually, help you to understand more about this person's shifts of mood. And you mentioned the game 24 in our match in Sevilla. It was our fourth World Championship match. I was world champion already. I beat him in 85 and retained title 86. In 87 it was a very tough match, and it was roughly equal. So, but then I after a terrible blunder, I lost game 23, and Karpov was 1 point ahead. I had to win the last game to retain the title. And there were ups and downs in the first phase of the game, because we still had the Germans. So the game was adjourned. I said there was ups and downs. I missed win. Karpov missed, for a draw. So, and the game was adjourned. I had an extra pawn, but I don't know. Let's say good winning chances, but call it 50-50. And I spent a lot of time with my coach analyzing the game. Wasn't sure whether it's really winning. We didn't have a clear winning plan. But I had no choice. I had to push. So I had to play the game. So just to see where it goes. So I had to play hours, even if I had to, just hours and hours, because it's just not winning meant losing the title. And I remember that when I walked in, so it was the game, the whole match was held in a big theater. It's a beautiful theater, Lope de Vega Theater in Sevilla. And I was at stage, so I sat down and I was waiting. Karpov was it's a couple of minutes late, and then when he walked in, and okay, I reached out, so this was a hand, just typical handshake before the game, and I could look in his eyes, and I could read in his eyes that he didn't believe he could survive. So it was so obvious for me that he was not. He lost faith that he could survive this game. So that somehow it was premature, but that's what happens. My mother also used to say that first you lose game psychologically, and then the result is being already fixed. And then it's in 2 moves he made what I believe was a decisive mistake. Somehow he wanted to fix the position. He had to keep his pawn structure more flexible, but I think again he wanted clarity, and it was a wrong decision. And then I knew, okay, it's there. It's still it was not easy, but
you exchanged the queens and
yeah, but it was already. Look, he already made a positional mistake, but also I could feel that I had my confidence. I could see that it's coming, and he was there. He was at the board, but it was mere presence, because he didn't believe that he could have succeeded. And what's interesting is that he resigned. His position was lost, but he still could make a last trick, which I have to say that I didn't see it, but he could have tried. I mean, he had to try, but I think his mind was already elsewhere. So I think he was preparing to resign, because he started game 24, just a few hours before regaining the title, before triumphant return. And then, next day, he had to defend position that looked hopeless. And it's like, the balloon that the air just was out because it was popped.
Yeah, it's beautiful to see that, because it doesn't feel like, logically, it doesn't feel like a psychological game. It feels like you have a perfect information game. You should be able to just play it on board.
Yes, it's 100% it's available information, but it's still about humans making decisions, because it's not the game that it's like in mathematics, the formula, bum bum bum. So this is right, this is wrong. Many situations in the game of chess, they require call psychological challenges, because it's not about winning or losing instantly, but it's about deciding, okay, I should play riskier.
Yeah.
I should take more risk, and recognizing the reaction of your opponent is very important, because you could see these emotions, and people always say, oh, Garry had emotions on his face. I didn't care, because I believe in the quality of the moves. So and somehow they were. Some of them got depressed, because I was not even trying to hide emotions. It was like sheer energy there at the board. So the 2 people, I'm sure there's also team effect. But when you have 2 people, there's always an energy, kind of the energy exchange, and it has an impact, because you make decisions, and it's a command that goes to your brain. And if your brain somehow is frightened, is paralyzed by whatever factor is, it definitely affects you.
And when you started coaching Carlsen, what advice do you recall giving him in the early days?
I had a first, just glance at Magnus games in 2005 when I left for chess, and we had a little session in Moscow. And I was very impressed. We already played, just in one tournament. I nearly lost the game, but you didn't have to be a very good player or just good coach to see that's a huge talent. But then in 2008, late 2008, so I got a call from a friend, a German friend, who just said, would you like to do something with Magnus? Because he already reached a point where talent alone was not enough. So he needed some, just basically good directions. So the year or so, about 13, 14 months, we worked together. So I helped him to make his work more systemic. That's the and also it was very convenient combination of styles, because whether it's chess or football or any other game, so you have different styles. Like in tennis, somebody with a powerful serve, rushing to the net, somebody playing from backline, or in football, you can have this, let's say Brazilian style, aggressive, or now you could say French, or you could have more defensive, like Italian. So, but you could win with either style. So but there's always nice to see how you can combine these things. So and in chess, we also have players that apply different strategies. So Karpov was more positional player, more solid. I was more aggressive. Magnus' style it's a kind of mixture of Karpov and Fischer. So that's why working with me was very helpful, because he could actually look at these problems, chess problems, from very different perspectives. So it was great contribution to his, I wouldn't call it education, but it's his knowledge of the game. So he learned about very different tactics or algorithms of analyzing the position. So it helped him to, fully develop his absolutely phenomenal talent.
But you've been playing against the first sort of, which was more driven by compute, the first programs that were driven by compute, and then you started seeing deep learning applied to chess programs, and there they could derive from all existing games, and then eventually with AlphaZero you had them learn through self-play. Mm-hmm. Did you start seeing a very different style when it learned through self-play rather than more imitation learning?
Look, I didn't play against AlphaZero because it was useless. I mean, it's very clear that we reached a point where any game with a computer was just, it's more of humiliation. So I think it's the competition phase was over probably by 2005, 2006. So I think the chess engines resoundingly beat even Vladimir Kramnik, my successor as a world champion, and I think there was humiliating outcome of the match of Hydra versus Mickey Adams. I think he made only one draw in 6 games, and it was very clear that this game was over. Which is interesting because there are the same cycles, whether it's chess or any other intellectual activity where machines are just engaged. So it starts with machines being very, not serious. Okay, it's just laughing stock. Then it's the second stages where you can compete, but they're still weak. It's beat most of the players, but top elite still can handle it. And then you have a moment of competition. So that's when it's really interesting. So it's on par. By the way, this is the shortest window. Ironically, that always has the greatest attention, the shortest window. And then it's machines are just dominant ever after. So that's it. It's over. So the period of competition was probably from early 90s to 2005. So it's less than 15 years. And we could see this development. So the computers that became serious opponents. This is I think the first one was Bell. It's by Ken Thompson. It's mid-80s. But it didn't play many games. And then, of course, Deep Thought, the program designed by these guys from Carnegie Mellon that later became Deep Blue after IBM purchased the program and designed it, or just developed this it's as a part of this parallel processors research. And also on a parallel track, we had chess engines and Fritz, and then Deep Junior. So, and it's the beginning of the 90s. So by 93, 94, it was clear that it was already tough. So it's the and in blitz and in rapid chess we suffered some painful defeats. But of course, Deep Blue was the most powerful one. But it was, again, they were not totally dominant. Obviously, they represent formidable opposition, but it was still very much based on a traditional approach, learning from human games. So again, it's helping machines to grow out of this old human experience. So the revolutionary shift was AlphaZero. But before AlphaZero appeared, the game was over already, because it's the oldest engines. And we have new engines, like Stockfish, and that's later Houdini, Stockfish, and others that totally crashed human opposition. And there was no need to play machines. So the only thing that made it exciting is when you had human and machines playing against other humans and machines. So this to see this combination. So AlphaZero came in. Yes, it was I think it was a result of this experience in Go, when they just realized that the machine that is trained on human experience could be crushed by the machine that has zero human experience and simply just plays against itself and learning all the patterns without, let's say, it's just the liability of human knowledge. So this is, which is often contaminated by some prejudices and some, just the ideas that stayed over, and that's why you don't have, courage to challenge these ideas, because they stayed for so long. And then it was shift to chess, and that's had, of course, tremendous impact, because all of a sudden we realized that, again, even in chess, which is much more developed than Go, that's the human knowledge, the accumulated over a few hundred years. It's not something absolute, and it could be easily challenged. Many of the ideas that have been introduced by AlphaZero, they became part of chess culture now, which I think it's a very good demonstration how we can benefit from these new generation of machines by simply looking at the ideas and incorporating it into our decision making.
When you study the history of chess, it feels like this is repeating itself in knowledge work now. You went from the early programs you joked about to becoming sort of increasingly better, initially mostly using compute and then imitation learning and then self-play. We're sort of at that stage now where we're going from the early GPT-2, GPT-3 models, GPT-4 even, that was mostly imitation learning, to increasingly self-play. And the argument we used to make a couple of years ago was, mostly quoting you, was, human plus machine is better than machine on its own. And the analogy that many would make would be chess. But that's no longer true in chess. Often the chess programs defeat the best humans plus chess programs today. What do you think will happen to knowledge work as we sort of go through that same journey?
No, I don't think that's correct assessment. So humans' assistance of, again, someone who understands how it works is still crucial. Yes, AlphaZero made many discoveries, but it has weaknesses. And the problem is that the machines like AlphaZero, they lack flexibility, because it develops its, let's say, chess culture or the vision of the game, patterns, and they're based on 60 million games it played. Nothing is perfect, and there are always weaknesses. With AlphaZero, for instance, is a balance between knight and bishop. So this is it puts higher numbers on bishop's strengths based on simply the number of positions where bishop is stronger than knight. Statistically, it's clear. If I have to advise the opposite computer, so I will definitely exploit this weakness, because some of the decisions in the opening that's being made, they always, they related to this miscalculation in evaluating the strengths of the pieces. I cannot exploit it, but I can definitely help another computer to start pushing this button. So basically to find this weak spot and attack this weak spot. Now the problem with AlphaZero, okay, this as a concept, so this for computer program to recognize this weakness, it has to lose probably 100,000 games before it starts balancing it. For humans, it will take 2 or 3 games, and I start making, the changes. So this is exactly the point. As long as we understand that fine-tuning is where we belong, I think we're indispensable, because we can see patterns much faster. Because all these learning models, they will always rely on millions and millions of iterations. But if something's there is wrong, it will take thousands, hundreds of thousands of iterations before you get there. While us, we could see it clearly. So again, it's finding about the right algorithm and basically, again, recognizing that we should not interfere with the main process. But there's always, fine-tuning here and there where our role could be very important. So that's why, we just have to reconsider our role. So the definition of many jobs have changed. Of course, this is when you talk about the other jobs that were not related to knowledge. So it might look different, but still, we always adjusted. Machines always made our jobs different, and those who could apply new strategies based on new technology, whether it was radio or television or whatever, so they always were successful. So it's all about new applications. It's all about recognizing what we can do by using our still belief indispensable human qualities to maximize the effect of working with computers.
There's this book I love called The Most Human Human. So when they do the Turing test, they also have a human winner, which is the human that most often sort of outcompeted the bots. And they study, what makes sort of humans unique in that context. And in that context, it's often like referring back to previous conversations. It's more sort of conversational hacking. But what do you think, why are you useful to AlphaZero? Is it your intuition? Is it what is the sort of human element that those programs they lack?
Yeah, but first of all, is this what is AlphaZero or whatever bot you're referring to as the ChatGPT? So they do exist, not in a vacuum. So it's still a part of our culture, of our business, of our social life, and they're not making decisions. So they are participating in the process. But at the end of the day, so this is they're not. They're not even close to humans because they're lacking the body movements, and that's another big philosophical debate whether you can have a properly functioning brains without body movements. That brings us to 17th century debate about it's how humans function. But again, I think it's a human flexibility on one side, and also because it's at the end of the day. So this is machine still has there's some rigid elements there. If we start big philosophical debate, we can go back to the Joseph Weizenbaum book back in 1976. It's where he described the difference between humans and machines, and in 1976 as a difference between choosing and deciding. Deciding, according to him, and again, he's one of the founding fathers of computer science. So this is the man who designed ELIZA, the prototype of Siri back in 1964. So deciding is computational. Choosing is very human. Because deciding means that if you ask computer this about decision being made, you go very deep down to the roots. I was told so. There's always a command element there. With human, it's because I want it. So this subtle difference. But again, it's a new challenge. We just have to recognize that there's some elements. The field is getting narrower and narrower. But that means that the value of human contribution could be phenomenal. If you just can't add a little bit to the computer, exactly what machine needs for this specific task, because again, machines are different, tasks are different, humans are different. So if you find the right combination, that's everything. Because in these days, you cannot win because you get some information earlier than others. It's all about split of a second. Just you found it. So it's all about the quality of decision making. And since decision making cannot ever reach 100%, there's always, this is the last few decimal places, this is, moving from 98.1 to 98.2, it could offer you a phenomenal advantage, competitive advantage. So again, it's about finding the right spot for indispensable human qualities. because again, machines are not absolutely perfect, and recognizing what they're missing to get close to perfection, it's almost an art.
Okay, one final question. What's the meaning of life?
I think you're mixing me with ChatGPT. So it's funny that I've no doubt that ChatGPT will try to answer the question. I mean, human should simply turn it down because it's useless. It's the for me, it's trying to be relevant, so as not to be redundant. This is to, and basically, I have certain code of behavior, of honor, and but meaning of life, it changes from one individual to another. So this is, I think you can get 8 billion different answers for this question.
What do you think you look back at as your life's work? In some regards, you got your life's work quite early. What would you look back at and be most proud of?
It's a very painful question because this the moment I started looking back at just it's my accomplishments and some failures. You always just your mind, my mind. It works. It's in a very exquisite fashion as a chess player. Okay. I made a mistake here, I made a bit. So you can clearly see that it is over these 40 years of professional life. So there's so many things could be done differently. The problem is, this is, and I know it, it's deep down that if you try to change one thing, it's like butterfly effect. So this is that everything else changes. So then you cannot pick up something and say, oh, you know what, on that day I had to do this one. So for instance, games of chess. So many mistakes I made. I could have won this game. But then life would be different. So it's all about an overall outcome. It's the overall result, and I'm fine. I could come up with tons of criticism of my own decisions, and I could definitely say I could do this one and that one better. But I'm where I had to be, and I know that sometimes our strengths is extension of our weaknesses or other way around. So it's certain things that made me so strong and capable and advanced in the game of chess somehow probably worked against me elsewhere. So life is a balance, but I look at this balance and I think I'm okay. I know this is what I could have done, but I could be proud of my accomplishments, both at the chessboard and outside. And I think this is the correct approach, going back to meaning of life. I think for us to look at this machines development and its relations between humans and computers, and recognizing that there will be wins and losses. So it's not win-win-win situation. But judging this progress from the position of humanity, just looking at 8 billion people, we're making progress. So I think this overall we're making progress. It may come with a huge cost, but it's very important for us not to slow down. So this is not to say, oh, it's too dangerous. Yes, it's dangerous, and there will be some really terrible consequences. Technology could bring prosperity, but also could bring destruction. We could see it now. This is the first and most effective implementation of any technology is for war. So this is there. So we could see that many of these things that were connected to drones, that we dreamt about, now are bringing death. Unfortunately, that's also part of a cycle. But we have to think, it's ahead. Again, as a humanity, we should believe that this drone technology and one day should help us to develop, civilization outside of Earth, on asteroids, on planets. So it's just recognizing that we just have to move forward, and also I don't think this could be any compromise. Only the free world, there's the free individuals. Only freedom can offer us the constant progress, and we just, we have to also recognize that the fight against those who are trying to keep our human energy under control, restrain our freedom. I mean, those are just not people, not systems that we should consider as a part of our future.
Yeah, and
I couldn't help by not making a political statement.